Alrighty, guys. Our next guest needs very little introduction. He is a three-time UFC Middleweight Champion. He is a future Hall of Famer, an all-around MMA legend. He is none other than Rich Franklin. Rich, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Hey, it's good to have me on again, guys. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. It's great to have you back on. Now, the last time we spoke, or since the last time we spoke, you've become the VP of ONE FC. Tell us, how exactly did that come about, and do you put VP in front of your name when filling out forms? Because we would totally do that.
Not yet, but I'm going to start doing that. It's actually a good idea. So I think what I'm going to start doing is just putting all my credentials, three-time world champ, VP. It's just I'll be like Apollo Creed in Rocky IV when he had all the nicknames with him right now.
Yeah, this is like Starbucks. You're ordering coffee and you're like, it's like, what name? It's like, well, three-time middleweight champion, ONE FC VP, Rich Franklin, please.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty much that standard anytime I go to Starbucks. So But no, I did a seminar down in Singapore several years ago, and then I was at Evolve where I did a seminar with Matt Hume, and I ended up going back to Evolve a couple times to conduct a few of my camps there, and in doing so, I met some of the ONE FC people, the people that work on the business side of things, and there were some conversations about possibly me taking a job with them at one point, and then that started to materialize. So basically, after certain conversations, I went to the UFC and said, "Hey guys, what's your plan with me post retirement?" They talked to me about using me in that company, but they really didn't have a position for me. And I said, "Well, ONE FC is offered me a job, and I'd be interested in taking it if you guys don't have anything for me here." And they basically said, "It sounds like a good opportunity. You should take it," which was surprising to me, but they did. And so that's kind of how the job came about. And so now I've been on staff now for a couple months with them, and things are going really well. I'm enjoying my position.
Now, Rich, for people in Australia who don't know, ONE FC puts on great shows, and you guys have really good attendance at the shows as well. I'm just curious, from your perspective, where does ONE FC fit into this whole puzzle with the UFC and Bellator and World Series of Fighting? In your mind, where does it fit?
Well, Asia is a big place. You look at the population of Asia, and it's tremendous compared to North America or North and South America or whatever. And so there's a big piece of the pie here that's untapped. And the thing that ONE FC does is they really focus on their Asian fighters. They have to. We're doing shows in Malaysia. We're doing shows in Singapore, Taiwan. We're going to Dubai for at the end of August for the next show. But and then after that we have Cambodia, and I've laid some of the groundwork in Cambodia. I went and did a little PR tour for them in Cambodia. But they're all over the place, and they have to be able to pull fighters from all these local areas. So I think it's a different product than the UFC is offering completely. The UFC is trying to come over to Asia. They've done a couple shows now on in Chinese soil, but they haven't gone to mainland yet. And ONE FC plans to go to mainland China before the end of the year, and they'll do a couple shows in mainland China, and then that's going to continue next year as well. So it's a much different product. They're really focused on Asia. They're Asian fighters, and once they have a real stronghold there, things will continue to develop. It's a slightly different environment because MMA is still a newer concept on that side of the globe. They have their talent pool is really, really strong, but once you get beyond 4 and 5 fighters deep, the number of fighters in Asia that are that talented, it's really difficult to find this talent. And so there's going to be some years of development, but we have some amazing fighters who put on great shows. If you've never attended a ONE FC show live, they're awesome shows. And in the matchups, Matt Hume does a great job with the matchups, and it's a well-run organization. Victor Quiz, the president, does a great job running the organization, and overall just good people to work with.
And just, Rich, in terms of how ONE FC's been received there, obviously, in America, the fans are one way, in Europe, the fans are one way, obviously in Pride, the fans were, very different. How are the fans in ONE FC, and how do they sort of take on the product?
It varies. I mean, it varies from nation to nation. And I've only been with the organization working in my position now for a couple months, so I've only seen 2 shows live. I've seen the Taiwan show that we just had live, and I saw the show that we did in Singapore live. And I would say of all the nations that I've been to in Asia, Singapore is definitely the most, I guess, kind of westernized. We have a show in the Philippines before the end of the year. I know that Jakarta does, or not Jakarta, but Manila does some of our biggest shows. And from what I've seen, not just in person, but from the other shows that I've watched online, like, the fans are really, really excited, which is much different than the experience I had when I fought in Japan, for example, because the Japanese fans, when I fought there, was really, really quiet, like watching a tennis match. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't seem to be that way across the board. So, it's really kind of an exciting thing to watch this spread across Asia, honestly.
Now, Rich, like you've mentioned, you've done shows in Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Dubai. You got coming up in August in Cambodia. It's bone picking time, Rich. Why isn't Australia on that list? We're sort of a part of Asia. We're very close. We're like a neighbor. Why aren't we on the list? What's going on? Dubai gets a show before us?
I don't know how Dubai got a show before you guys. Obviously, listen, I've only been there for 2 months, but believe me, I'm going to be pushing for them to bring a show to Australia for sure. And I'm sure this whole show with Dubai was in the works well before I got there. But they'll have some explaining to do as to why they decided to basically go to the Middle East as opposed to their brother country down there. I'm not really sure, so I can't speak on behalf of Victor for that one.
That's all right. Now, I wanted to ask you, Rich, have you had, in terms of ONE FC and the product, have you had a chat to Dana about it much? Maybe get some ideas. And what's ONE FC's relationship like with the UFC? Because obviously, developing fighters and growing MMA in Asia, it's so important in general.
Yeah, I haven't personally spoke to anybody over at the UFC. I know that I believe that Victor has a good working relationship with the UFC. I don't know the nature of that. And I think at this point, just for example, here in the States, when I tweet out stuff about ONE FC, I have a lot of people that just flat out they don't know what ONE FC is yet, and so I don't know if the UFC really views ONE FC as a competitor like a Bellator or something like that that's really threatening to them, especially on this side of the pond, so to speak.
Absolutely, Richard. UFC, they've got the Fight Pass out. They put in Victor on that Fight Pass. Would you see Fight Pass as a means to get ONE FC out in America if you guys are looking to expand, the reputation of ONE FC, like you mentioned, in the US? Some people may not know what it is.
I don't really know. I don't know if they'll follow the same plan that ONE FC is, because the nature of ONE FC, their whole business plan is different. The concept of pay-per-view over here in Asia is not the same as it is in the U.S. And so all the ONE FCs, they're broadcast live on Star Sports or ESPN and things like that, and they don't depend on their pay-per-view sales, on a pay-per-view sale in order to make their revenue. They're doing live broadcasting, and then money comes in from endorsements and sponsors and things like that, and television rights. So it's a different plan altogether. I don't know. I don't know how that'll pan out in the future for Fight Pass and all that kind of stuff. And that's that'd probably be a better question for Victor. I'll just say this much. You have to realize that ONE FC at this point in time, they're an organization that's had what have we done? 18 shows now, and for 18 shows, they do an amazing production, put on an amazing show, and just we're growing exponentially every show. So I would look for something like that in the future. I don't know if it'll develop the same as it did in the States.
Now, Rich, you're often in the news now in regards to ONE FC, but a lot of the fans, they keep talking about your final match in the or your final fight in the UFC, talking about your next fight and last one. Have you recently thought about any possible opponents for your final fight? And are we any closer to knowing anything about when you'll be back in the octagon?
No, not yet. I'm really acclimating to this job right now. It's a decision that I'm going to have to make real soon, and I really need to sit down with the people at ONE FC and talk about that, like the reality of, because I have some responsibilities here, and I'm traveling quite a bit back and forth between the States and Asia now, and what the reality is of me continuing with my responsibilities with ONE FC, and then also prepping for a fight and all that kind of stuff. And I'll sit down and I'll have to sit down with them real soon and talk to them about that, because I'm getting at a point now where I need to pull the trigger on that last fight, because I'm so far distanced from my previous fight that basically if I'm going to do something, I need to do it now, type of thing.
Sorry to cut in, Dennis. Do you feel almost like people talk about ring rust and things like that? Do you feel almost like if when you do get that fight and you do sort of start training, do you feel like there'll be a big sort of start over process for you?
I'm sure, which is why I wouldn't accept a fight and just go straight into like fight training and prepping for an opponent. Like there will be some time where I acclimate back into training, and not that I'm not training. I train basically every day. I do something, but there's a difference between this kind of what I will call recreational training and prepping for an opponent. And so I'll spend some time just putting myself back into getting into the groove of things before I actually start prepping for a fight.
And, Rich, there's been some big fights in the UFC of late, and we were just wanting to get your thoughts. What did you think about the big Weidman versus Machida fight? Did you get a chance to watch it? And what do you think of Weidman as a champion? Because I think a lot of people are pretty impressed with how he's going so far.
No, but I don't know. I made the prediction on my social media that Weidman would win that fight. And the reason I didn't actually watch the fight. I was in transit traveling somewhere, and so I read about it and caught some highlights later. But I thought Weidman would win that fight only because looking at after the first Anderson Silva fight, like there was a lot of people that thought that maybe it's a fluke, Anderson got caught, maybe Anderson underestimated him, blah, 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 whatever. These kinds of things happen. But then you look at the second fight. Now, of course, the fight got stopped with injury, but prior to that, you could see that Weidman was controlling the fight. He was controlling the pace. And what really impresses me about him is that he's very patient as a fighter. Like, he's very patient, and then through his patience, he's able to make his game plan unfold, which is something that Machida is really good at. But Anderson and Lyoto, they have that similar style, that kind of like sit back in the pocket, counter punch, depend on their timing. Lyoto does a really good job of sucking you into his game because he's a very patient fighter. But Weidman didn't let that happen with Anderson, and so I kind of figured that he would have Lyoto's number, and that's what ended up happening with that fight. I'm a believer. I think I think there are people out there that are still questioning whether or not Weidman's legit or if there was some fluke wins or whatever, but I'm a believer in Weidman, and I think he's going to make a great champion. So I think he'll be around for a while.
Yeah, and I think Weidman definitely proved himself in that fight, and proved the critics wrong. As well as speaking of the middleweight division, there's also been some issues in that division in regards to some of the drugs in MMA. A couple of these fighters, obviously, you fought like Wanderlei, Vitor Belfort, and of course, there was one-time talk of Chael Sonnen with the whole Twitter situation. What are your thoughts on these situations and what happened with these guys?
Well, look, the thing with sports, listen, TRT and all that kind of stuff, you really need to take a step back, and before you get to these fighters, you need to look at the situation that the sport got into. There was a time when we started talking about TRT and allowing this and not allowing this, and basically the athletic commission decided that they were going to allow the fighters to use it, that they thought that they could regulate it. Well, you know how things go. You give somebody an inch, and they're going to take a mile, and that's what happens. And so, once you allow these kinds of things to happen, it's you're just setting yourself up for problems. And I think that that's basically what ended up happening. And so now, as the UFC as an organization, they have to kind of backpedal, and they have to say, well, we're just going to have a zero tolerance policy with this. Which, one way or the other, you would have had to go that way. You would have had to say, you know what? we're just going to completely ignore this and let people do what they're going to do, or we have a zero tolerance policy. And so they ended up with the zero tolerance policy. And it's going to be difficult. I've spoken about this before. This is going to be a very difficult thing for the athletic commissions in the UFC to regulate, because you're going to different countries now. In the United States, things they're set up like you have urinalysis facilities and all that kind of stuff. And not to say that people can't be crooked, but it's a lot easier to be crooked when you're getting your urinalysis done in a place like Brazil, where there may not be as much regulation and stuff like that, where a fighter can go in and have somebody possibly pee for him, or even the doctor at the urinalysis place. Like, you don't know what kind of practices are going on in different countries, especially when you're off the beaten path a little bit. And this is going to be problematic. It's going to be problematic for the UFC for time to come. And so I don't know how they're going to overcome that obstacle, to be real honest.
Yeah, that's a great point there, Rich. We've spoken to a few fighters, and a couple of things that we've gone back and feedback is a couple of fighters, they're a little bit disappointed where they find out some of their past opponents, have been caught with certain substances, or they're having some issues. Knowing that you fought Wanderlei and Vitor, does it ever play in your mind that, I fought these guys, and I don't know if they were on anything or not, but now it's proven that there were times in their career where they might have been on something. Does that make you think about those matchups that you had with them?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, when you read about something like that, your first thought is, well, I wonder if that was the case when I was fighting. Because from the inception of this sport on to modern day today, like, there are going to be people that once they start testing, they know how to beat the system, and then when they have more strenuous testing, people have better ways of beating the system. And you see it in other sports. You see things in baseball where all of a sudden a baseball player gets caught, and I would imagine that the fan's initial reaction, a fan would say, like, well, why would this baseball player do this, knowing that they're doing all this testing now and they could get caught? Well, the reason why is because things like this, they never stop. People just figure out ways to beat the system. They can beat. They know how to, like, step down chemicals or use masking agents or do whatever it is that they're doing. But they figured out ways to beat the system. And so it'll always be a problem. That's what ends up happening. It's like any system is like that. You take technology, for example. I write a program, then somebody out there writes a way to hack the program, so I have to update my program. And you basically, what the whole battle is staying ahead of the hacker, and that's essentially what you have to do. Like, your rigorous testing abilities and ways to detect things have to stay ahead of the ways that people are going to use these substances. And so, going back to the original question, like, yeah, you start thinking, like, well, was that the case when we were fighting? And what is, what was, what could have been, what may have been. There was no positive test at the time, so I'm not going to sit here and kill myself over wondering. But that thought crosses your mind.
Yeah, of course. Very well put, Rich. Now, as opposed to the past, looking to the future, before we jump to the tap-out round and answer some fan questions, Zeeland, one of the best juice and food places in California, had a major announcement last month, and can you share it with the listeners?
Yeah, well, we sold our cafe last month, which was probably partially a blessing. I loved having my cafe, but doing a brick-and-mortar store in California is a ton of work. So we're able to actually find a buyer for the cafe. Somebody bought the cafe, and we're focusing in on wholesaling our product. Right now we're going through some rigorous FDA testing and stuff like that to looking at, like, shelf life and stuff like that. We have a good idea on how we can increase the shelf life of the current product on the market. And if we're successful with this, then it can be a game changer in the industry. If not, then we will be much like every other juicing company out there, except for, I think, our recipes taste way better. So we'll see. I should know something in the next couple months on that.
Oh, absolutely. And you'll have to let us know as well because, all your Australian fans are still waiting for an opportunity to get some good old Zeeland down under. So, well, you'll have to keep us on top of that. And speaking of you fans down under, we've got a couple of fan questions for you, Rich. So when you're ready, we'll
Oh,
shoot a couple your way.
let's do this, man.
So,
All right.
Clear 31 wants to know one fighter you wish to have fought, past or present.
One fighter that I wish to have fought, past or present.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I would like to fight Bruce Lee. I think there's Bruce was such a pioneer of MMA. He's been titled the father of MMA because of his philosophy of his martial arts systems, and there's not a lot of documented combat of his. So it would have been interesting to just kind of to play that realm with somebody like that.
That's a very good point. But imagine if you beat him up, then I feel like you'd feel bad. Like people would be like, "Oh no."
You know what? First of all, I don't even know what I would do. That's like, honestly, if that happened, that would be the equivalent of when I was like 7 and I found out there was, I don't know if I should say this on the radio, there was no Santa.
There's no Santa? Damn it.
Breaking hearts, Rich.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, you can always...
Yeah, I don't know if any of the listeners are going to be like, wait a minute, my kid is 7.
Yeah, you just lost a
just
large
ruined
portion
it
of
for
our
everybody.
listeners for us, Rich. No, that's fine. Now, Magnum 1978 wants to know, what rules and scoring system do you prefer, the unified rules or the global rules of MMA? The rule set and judging system used by ONE FC.
Yeah, so this is some getting used to for me. I'm going to be honest. I've been indoctrinated with the unified rules, and the first time that I'd seen the global rules was for the show that I attended back in May, the Singapore show that I went to, and one of the fighters landed a nice little kick to the head, and live. And knowing that that's going to happen and actually seeing it happen is a different thing, because I haven't seen anything like that since Pride. Basically, what ONE FC did is they looked at the rules, the rules that could have existed and that did exist in Pride, and they basically took the rules that really didn't put the fighters in any more danger, like knees to the head on the ground and knees to the head, or kicking to the head on the ground. And you're still not allowed to stomp an opponent with a downward stomp, but it just changes the nature of the fight. A wrestler can't shoot in and then get stuffed on the shot and sit there on all fours, because somebody stuffing the shot can, when they sprawl out, they have the ability to basically start kneeing them in the head. And so what it does is it really forces you to kind of, choose your strategy intelligently, and two, keep the fight moving. You're not just going to put a knee down when you're in that position and not get kneed in the head. And it really is like when I saw the kick land on the ground, it really wasn't much different than watching somebody get kicked in the face standing up either. It's about the same either way. So from an excitement standpoint, I definitely am quickly learning to enjoy the global rules much better.
Awesome. And Brown Pride wants to know, who hit you the hardest, and who was your best knockout?
What was the first part of that question?
The first part was, who has hit you the hardest in a fight, and who was your best knockout?
Well, I'll tell you, I have two people that hit me the hardest. And one was before I was in the UFC. I fought a guy by the name of Aaron Brink, and I was sick for that fight. I had over 104 fever, and I just remember this guy came out and hit me right off the bat, and it snapped my head so far back that I was looking at the ceiling, staring at the light fixtures. But I tell you, I think the hardest person that's ever hit me in my career is probably Chuck. Chuck has very, very heavy hands, and just every time he would hit me with something, I mean, he kicked me and broke my arm. So every time he hit me, it just felt like he was like swinging a sledgehammer and it was crashing into my body or hit me in the face or whatever. So definitely Chuck. And my best knockout. I mean, the one that they play all the time is the Nate Quarry knockout, and so that's just, it's one of those when you have a clean knockout, I'll just say that when you have a clean knockout, it's just one of those things that you don't really throw the punch hard. And when it connects, it's all about the timing, and as soon as it happens, that it's lights out, because it's just everything connects. And that's what I remember about that punch, is just when it landed, thinking like, oh, I didn't even throw that punch that hard, but everything just kind of came together at the right.
And I always imagine that's what it would feel like if I was a fighter, Rich. So thank you for taking us into the mindset of how it feels. Now we've got the Tapout round. It's been voted as in the top 3 sexiest MMA segments in the world. So we're going to throw some questions at you. They're like quick questions that you answer off the top of your head. We did this last time.
Well, you had me all excited because I thought you were saying that I was voted one of the top 3 sexiest MMA fighters in the world, but this was not about me. It was about the questioning sequence. And now I'm all discombobulated. I'm not sure I'm going to do well at this.
Well,
let's give it a go.
We can release an article and we can put you in the top 3, Rich. So don't worry, that can happen as well.
You know what? That's voted by Submission Radio.
There you go.
That's right. And you're joining Wanderlei Silva and Diego Sanchez on the episode this week, so you're definitely in the top 3 sexiest this week as well. But let's kick it off now, Rich. When you return for your one fight, of course you'll return to your natural weight class of middleweight or light heavyweight. But in case you didn't, we've got some options for you that we'd like you to consider. If you could return for a fight in one weight class and just any weight class, which one would you choose? Options include super heavyweight, featherweight, flyweight, and pride.
Open weight.
Oh, let me make sure. Am I returning to? Am I going to fight 155 or flyweight at my current weight, or am I going to be a 125-pound version of myself?
No. You jump into a machine that turns you into a super heavyweight, or it turns you into a featherweight, or it turns you into a flyweight, or a pride open weight.
I'll go with a flyweight because I would love to. Let me make sure. Hold on. Now I'm confused. Is flyweight the smallest class?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so I've trained with Demetrius Johnson before, and I've trained with him at my weight, and I remember we were doing some guard casting drills, and he's just like all over the place. So it would be interesting to see what it would be like. Like, the only advantage I had was the fact that I outweighed him by 60 plus pounds or whatever, 80 plus pounds probably, because I wasn't cutting for a fight at that point in time. But it would be interesting to fight somebody like that that's that fast at that weight, just to see how difficult that would actually be for me.
Yeah, definitely. Now, with the growing up popularity of grappling events, could we possibly see Rich Franklin at a Metamoris event one day?
I don't know. Probably not. I've never been really excited about grappling events, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't had much success in them either. I've done one grappling event in my life, and I got smoked bad. I'd only been training for like 3 months, but I grappled a guy that had been grappling for over a year, and he basically tried a flying armbar that transitioned to a triangle, back to an armbar, back to a triangle. This was every bit of about 35 seconds, and it was bad news for me. I'll say this much: my grappling style is very MMA oriented. I'm all about positioning and being able to strike, and I honestly, like, I don't have like a really slick submission game, and so I don't know if like just out positioning somebody and looking for points and winning and stuff like that is makes great for. It's almost disrespectful to the art of grappling, so to speak. You know what I mean?
You're too humble, man. I'm sure you would have done fine. Now, this is an interesting one. ONE FC names its cards, which brought us to bring up some of the worst UFC pay-per-view card names, and we've brought up 3 options for you. We'd like you to choose what was the worst UFC pay-per-view card name. Okay, so option number 1 is UFC 85. It was called Bedlam. The main event was Thiago Alves versus Matt Hughes. We don't know why it was called Bedlam. UFC 76.
It was called what?
It was called Bedlam. Bedlam. I don't know why they call. Yeah, why did they call it Bedlam? I don't know. UFC 76 was called Knockout. The main event was Liddell versus Jardine. There were no knockouts on the entire card. The UFC and the third option was UFC 87. It was called Seek and Destroy. Why was it called Seek and Destroy? We're not sure, but it was called Seek and Destroy. Please choose the one that you think is the worst.
We're going to have to go with Knockout since it did happen.
I feel like
there was not one knockout.
Did they jinx themselves by doing that? Like nobody knocked on wood when they named the card knockout.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, and, maybe they, have they ever had a card called submission where nobody got submitted either?
What about a card called Lane Parade, and then everybody got knocked out, but everyone was happy that it didn't live up to the name?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's what they need to do. Then what they need to do is call UFC decision, and then every none of the fights go to decision.
That would be hilarious. Now, Rich, the last two questions. What's the biggest difference about being on the other side of the fence and being a VP as opposed to a fighter?
Oh, man, the biggest difference. Man, there's a ton of them. I think I don't know if this is the biggest difference, but the thing that I notice the most is when I'm sitting cage side, like I'll be sitting there cage side and I'll be like weaving my head and like as if I'm fighting or cornering a fighter or something like that. Like being at the arena still puts me in the mental mind state as if I'm fighting, basically. And that's kind of a weird thing to deal with, because there has to come a point in time where it's like, okay, I'm not fighting, I need to let that go, or at least let that go for the 3 to 4 hours that I'm going to be sitting in the arena watching this thing. And so that's something that's been really tricky for me.
And finally, Rich, there's a lot of great fighters in ONE FC. Give us a name. Give us a name of a ONE FC fighter that we might not know about, but we should put on our radar and keep an eye on. All the MMA fans in Australia should Google after this interview. What's the name in ONE FC that we'll be seeing more and more of in the future?
Well, you guys, do you know who Rob Lucida? Because he's from Australia, though.
We've heard of him. I think we've seen about 1 or 2 of his fights.
Okay, yeah, he just lost his last fight, but I'll tell you, man, he was running the show the whole fight. I really enjoyed watching him as a fighter, and he's exciting, and he's a bulldog, and he just, like I said, he was winning the fight, made a mistake, ended up costing him, and ended up costing the fight. But great little fighters from Australia, but I'll be real honest. Like on the next card, I'm really interested in seeing Shinya Yoki. He's a Japanese guy fight. I haven't seen him fight live yet, and that's one of just several names that you can definitely look out for. And he's from I've seen tapes of him, but it'll be nice to see him fight live. So that's what I'm really interested in seeing on the Dubai card.
Well, there you go, guys. You can follow Rich at Rich Franklin on Twitter, or you can check out ONE FC at ONE FC MMA. Make sure you follow them. They have an event, ONE FC 19 Reign of Champions. It's on August 29th in Dubai, United Emirates, not in Australia. For some reason, they went to Dubai, but that's okay. We'll check out the card. And Rich, keep us in touch. Let's stay in touch and let us know how ONE FC is doing, because we're very excited about it.
For sure. And I tell you what, we could maybe one day I'll end up when I'm down there for a show. We have a show coming up in Singapore or something like that. Maybe I can jump on a little plane, head over that way, and do a seminar or a couple seminars over in Australia while I'm on that side of the earth or something.
For sure. Well, Diego Sanchez has his seminar coming down. People are always coming to Australia, so I'm sure we'd all absolutely love to have Rich Ace Franklin come down and teach us some moves.
For sure, man. All right. Well, we'll talk sometime soon in the future.
Awesome. Rich, thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, guys. Appreciate it.